And literally kids from the neighborhood would come over and say, hey, can Tyler play? They'd ask for me.
Yeah.
And so I've always been that kind of dad.
Okay.
Last night we had a youth activity in our neighborhood and we had a slip and slide. And I'm on the slip and slide with the kids. I'm rubbing myself down with Dawn and like going down the slide trying to knock kids over, you know?
Is there video?
There might be.
Okay, we might need that.
Welcome to Brainstoke. I'm Tom Telford with Preston Niederhauser. We are in studio today with Tyler Servoss. Great to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for making the drive.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome.
Tyler, you're known in local cycling circles. It seems like everybody knows Tyler, right? I mean, everywhere I've been around you, there's always been a connection with somebody else in the room.
Yeah.
How has cycling defined who you are with regards to your relationships?
That's a great question. So I started cycling when I was, as a kid like anybody else, but I shaved my legs and put on Lycra for the first time in 1992. And I went to the Utah Summer Games and I happened to win the criterium in the 15-16 age group. And that just started my love for bicycle racing. And so that's 32 years that I've been in and around bicycle racing in Utah. I always tried to find ways to kind of tie that into my living. So I'd promoted 20 plus races, including the Rockwell Relay, a long distance road relay from Moab to St. George that we had, thousands of people do really over the years.
So you've met a ton of people in 30 plus years of putting on Lycra.
Met a ton of people and beyond even what I do with the bike riding, like a lot of my success in business and in employment and life has been through the network that I built from just hanging out with cool people on bicycles.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bonding that happens when you're pedaling and suffering together.
There is something about suffering with a buddy, isn't there? Yeah.
You can trace it all back to shaving those legs. It works. Shaving's faster.
That's right.
It just starts there. It's a slippery slope.
I had to ask my girlfriend, then wife, how to get behind the knee the right way and not cut, And she gave me some coaching and now I'm just expert at it.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
By the way, this segment is brought to you by Bolt.
Right? My legs are shaved by Bolt. Adam Barker's an amazing human being.
Oh, do you know Adam?
I do. I love his product.
Speaking of the network, it's just cool. So, well, we're excited to spend some time with you because as much as cycling has been part of your life and, willfully choosing to suffer on the bike, man, you've been through some tough stuff. So tell us a little bit about your personal story and then take us into some of these, what Brainstoke would call the struggle, that led to the Stoke. So give us a little background.
I'll start, I think from a broader perspective. So when I was a teenager, my girlfriend and I got pregnant and decided to keep our baby and get married and start a family. So that's when I was 17. We just had our 30th anniversary, my wife and I.
Wow. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
30 years.
30 years.
Awesome.
We've got 7 beautiful children, a couple of bonus kids in the mix from that, with in-laws and whatnot. And it's just been a really awesome journey. Like that, our first kid, his name is Cadence, just an incredible kid. And he grew up around bike races. He'd show up at the bike races and he'd be like wearing my jersey or something. Or people just knew him. When I started that Rockwell Relay event, he was just a 13-year-old kid helping me out, throw cones. And then by the last year I did it, I would just give him the keys to like a rented $100,000 pickup and be like, see you in St. George. And he would set the whole course himself and run a crew. And it was just a beautiful thing. And I bring Cadence up specifically because last year in February of 2023, he was in a motorcycle accident and he didn't survive. He passed away from a spinal injury. And that's been a part of the struggle, part of the experience for me is just dealing with that grief and somebody where as your children grow up and enter those adult years, sometimes it's more like they're your kid, but they're also your buddy.
Totally.
And
best friend.
Yeah, best friend. A lot of great conversations with him. He was a CDL truck driver and he'd get in the truck every day and start his shift and he'd call me on his headset we talked for 20 minutes about what was going on in his life. And I sure miss those conversations. But that's part of what one of the struggles that I deal with and that I'm dealing with that grief. And I'll broaden that a little bit, that I myself am a survivor of a spinal injury. So in 2020, I had a crash on my road bike, and I had tires blow out on a descent. I hit a parked car. I broke my neck. So I shattered C7, and then I also fractured C2. So it was $150,000 surgery to put titanium in my spine, go through and bolt me together, put plates in a titanium cage. And so it's been an experience for me as I reflect on this situation with my son, where I survived a terrible spinal injury, and I'm back, and I won the group ride today. Like I'm fully functioning. And then other situations, like my son had a spinal injury and didn't survive. Recently, my good friend Miguel Payan crashed on a mountain bike, and he passed away from a spinal injury. And sometimes just don't understand how God works in regards to why things happen one way for one person and differently for another. So I deal with a little bit of survivor's guilt, just trying to understand what my purpose is here, continuing on. But
I want to hear more about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
When you go through situations like that, specifically your son, you mentioned survivor's guilt, which is real. In a lot of ways, Preston can, maybe address this from an avalanche survivor's perspective, but how do you do it? How do you face that, and what have you chosen to do? You and I talked just offline about cycling on one hand has high risk, and there's a lot of, there's a lot of components to the risk factor of that. But the flip side of that is the very thing that, creates a risk that we all accept. It's also our coping. And so how do you find that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, people ask me after my accident, like, am I going to keep riding a bicycle? I'm like, am I going to keep breathing? Like, it's something I've done for 30 years, and it keeps me sane, and I take great joy in it. And I love the camaraderie and the competition and the speed and the adrenaline and all those elements of it. And I don't feel like I don't feel like God intended for us to show up at the end of our lives with a perfect body that's all intact and everything's fine, and just, that quote about coming in sliding sideways, like that's how I want to go. And when I consider like my son and his passing, he was dealing with some stresses in life, some challenges he was having financially and with work, and he had a knee injury, and his favorite thing was just to ride his motorcycle. His first word, I think, was motorcycle. And he was riding a Victory Vision that he had saved and bought and himself and tricked it all out and just loved it. Had all his safety gear on, had his headphones in. I'm sure he was listening to some of his favorite music. And that's the way he left this world was, he loved mythology, Norse mythology. And so I consider it like riding the lightning. He kind of rode the lightning, and he's on his way to Valhalla in his experience. And that's the way like I would want to go. Even with Miguel, like that just broke my heart with Miguel, but he was on a mountain bike ride, and an accident happened on the mountain bike ride. And if you're going to go, going out, doing something you love is a pretty beautiful, beautiful thing.
I love the idea that you shared of finishing this life with a body that you've used and taken advantage of, and it's maybe a little worn out and tired. I liked that, the way you put that together. How have you managed to keep it together as a father of a big family and as a husband dealing with something so tragic? Like, share a little bit about how within the walls of your home you guys have worked through the passing cadence and what that's been like, and maybe some of the wins you've had along the way.
So Cade was married to Kylie for 7 years. Beautiful woman, and she ended up moving in with us. So we, with her family support, we're the best support available to her. So she's with us. She actually purchased a travel trailer. So we have a little trailer park in our yard. She lives in a trailer. And so we've helped her to grieve through that process, and our family as well. I always thought the grief was linear for some reason, that you would just kind of move through some stages of grief, and then you'd be done grieving and it would be all over, you know? And it is not linear by any means. And that I see that often. So my wife, my sweetheart, probably is more vocal about it and has more frequent, just emotional upwellings, you know? And I stay pretty even keeled, but then I'll hear a song that he loved, or I'll hear, you know, I'll be doing something or something that will remind me of him. So we've had a lot of open conversations in our family about the grief. We talk about him often. We keep him alive. We celebrate his birthday. We celebrate traditions. You know, we set a place at the table for him when there's a family thing just to remember him. And really, I think our faith helps a lot. Our family is a mixed faith. Like, I'm practicing LDS. Nobody else currently is in my family. So there's different faith systems, but we all believe that his spirit carries on and that he's somewhere in a better place, you know, and that we'll get to see him again. And that really helps me helps all of us really, I think, to deal with that loss.
Yeah. Kay didn't have children.
No, he had a cat. So I got a grand cat.
Yeah.
You know? Percy. No, he, you know, on that personal level, that he was the oldest of 7 children. He was there as we struggled as young people trying to establish a family and career. And he always wanted more stability, you know, and that's a difficult thing for me sometimes, where he wanted a nice bicycle. He wanted a motorcycle and a 4-wheeler and all the toys. And he would see that with other fathers around him, maybe families are more established or further along in their careers. And I always wanted to give that to him. And, you know, I hope to have that opportunity at some point in his life to do that, even if I couldn't do it when he was young, to help him and go play and do those things. And those missed opportunities are hard, you know. And when you think about the future just without somebody like that.
Yeah. That's incredible. I mean, being a father, you know, of adult children, that's incredible how you've chosen to, I don't know, embrace his spouse as a widow.
Yeah.
You know, talk about that relationship a little bit, how that's been just, I don't know, in a way, if he's not going to be here, to have someone he was closest to still be that close.
Yeah.
Has that been a positive?
It's been awesome, really, to have her around. And I have definitely a fathering heart. I always love to, you know, this desire to father the fatherless. And she didn't have a lot of a father figure influence in her life. And so it's an opportunity for me to just love her and support her and show her what a kind and loving father can be like, you know?
Why do you do that? How come you have that feeling in you?
You know, I was a young father. My wife tells this story often, that we'd live somewhere and I'd go out and play with the kids. I'd push them on swings, or I'd throw them around, or do all these things. And literally kids from the neighborhood would come over and say, "Hey, can Tyler play?" They'd ask for me.
Yeah.
And so I've always been that kind of dad.
Okay.
Last night we had a youth activity in our neighborhood and we had a slip and slide. And I'm on the slip and slide with the kids. I'm rubbing myself down with Dawn and like going down the slide trying to knock kids over, you know?
Is there video?
There might be.
Okay, we might need that.
And there's some other fathers in the mix, but that's the kind of dad that I am. And so I love that. So I've always enjoyed mentors in my life.
Yeah.
And I've always enjoyed mentoring. And so that's happened often, actually, with the bicycle racing as well. Is I love that. And, you know, I will, just the other day, I rode up next to somebody and I was like, "Hey, do you mind a little pointer? Like, you're turning a really big gear on this hill. You know, you want to get on top of the gear instead of just grinding that gear out. Shift it down a little bit and see how that feels." And the gentleman was appreciative. And, you know, I have a soft place in my heart for those who are fatherless, you know, or who need mentoring, and I'm open to being mentored. I love to be mentored and be taught.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, by the way, it's rare, you know, today, for people to just give the time and, you know, to spend the time and to be with kids, you know, in that capacity where you're on their level. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Slip and slide. That's cool.
It's good.
What else have you learned, you know, as you kind of, I don't know, you know, you sounded like you started bike racing at a young age. So what did you take from the cycling or the bike racing discipline that allowed you to, I don't know, cope or face some of those trials that came?
Yeah, I think that learned about myself and my ability to do difficult things, to do hard things. Like rolling back on that story, when I became a young father, I still had ambitions to be a professional cyclist. So I had some amazing opportunities. I got to go to talent ID camp at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. Was there with contemporaries who went on to race the Tour de France and do lots of big things. And at the same time, I was there. I went my last time at the OTC. I was there with my wife and 2 kids in a hotel room, and everybody else is in the dorm. And I am changing diapers, and I'm racing bikes, and I've been working full time as a landscaper and training 20 to 30 hours a week coming into that. And these were old times, and I didn't really understand the recovery element that was needed. So I didn't do great, didn't make it onto the next level. And then at that point, I just realized that the lifestyle that was available to me as a young father and a professional cyclist with the income that was available and so forth was not really very glamorous. My wife could probably stay with my parents, and I could go to Europe for 6 months at a stint and make a small salary and come back. And so I really decided to put that aside and focus on my family and on my career. And so I took a break for like 5 years from competitive cycling, and then I came back. And in that comeback, one of the first things I did was the Logan to Jackson race. And I had been a category 2, knocking on the door of my category 1. And after that 5-year gap, I just got a 1-day license and went out and raced. And it happened to be the Snowderja year in 2005. So I took off in a breakaway, and it was an hour up on the other Cat 5s in my group, maybe a little sandbagging. But I'm rolling along, and I got to Montpelier, and they were doing a hypothermia check. I couldn't actually squeeze my water bottle. I had to kind of palm it. And I was in short sleeves, shorts, and I just lied to the paramedics. I'm fine. They let me go. I rode all through Star Valley just thinking that, looking at tufts of grass on the side of the road, like I could just lay down and take a little rest right there for just a minute. I probably would have never woken up. Yeah. But I finished that Loderja, and in the snow and the grit, and half the field dropped out, and that was just another reminder that I can do hard things and that I can push myself. And so I have, and then I think, even as I mentioned my injury before, like I got home from the hospital and my wife was asleep because she was exhausted. I got up, I was in a neck brace and had a spinal, fusion and incision. And I got up and went for a walk around the block, and I sent her my Strava beacon so she would know where I was if she woke up. She woke up. She thought I went on a bike ride, and she was, livid.
She was.
But then with that injury, I started walking and hiking. So in the month of July, I was injured on July 7th. And by the end of the month, I'd walked like 100 miles. And I would just go out and hike and do these long walks and just stay active. Then I was on the rollers by 3 weeks after my fusion. And I just came back. And by the fall, I was like, by October, I was able to like be competitive in a group ride again. And I just am highly blessed that everybody has a certain amount of space in their spinal column. And my injury didn't damage my spinal cord. So it pushed into the spinal column, but there was enough space in there that there was no nerve damage, and they were just able to repair it. But my recovery was really fast and also I'd done a lot of core strength and a lot of work before. At that time, I owned a group fitness gym. And so I was often working out in the gym with the clients. And so I think that just helped with my recovery and helped preserve me from further injury.
It's amazing. What is it internally about you in those moments, though? It's like you're in a neck brace, you just have this big surgery. Is there something from childhood or somewhere along the way where you just have this internal drive to get back or to get to some place?
Yeah, I think that I have kind of worked through this, but for a long time, I sort of had a chip on my shoulder. I mean, I was a 17-year-old father, dropped out of high school, went and got 3 jobs, and just went, world, I'm going to take responsibility for my actions, and I'm going to make this work. I'm going to prove to everybody that I'm not a screw up. And so that drove me for so long, running from that to just prove to everybody that I could do something. And then eventually I realized that I'm worthwhile regardless of things that happened in the past. I'm not a victim. I own where I'm at, but I have that that knowingness in myself that I can do hard things and I can recover and I can come back and I'm an exceptional human being. And so when an injury occurs, I'm like, of course, I'm going to be back at it, as soon as possible. And I'm probably rush things more than I should. That's probably my downfall,
Is that the same thing that gets you out of bed today? That same chip on your shoulder, that same thought process, or how has it evolved?
No, I think it has evolved. I think I've been able to realize more of my own self-worth that comes from within. And that eternal quest for, that brighter future day where things are going to be beautiful when everything comes together. And I realized that day never actually comes. And I've learned more to take joy in the journey. Like full candor. Right now I'm building a business and it's building slowly and it's a struggle. It's a trial to put food on the table and make things happen. But I take time. During my day today, I stopped. I went on a group ride with the Auto Leave riders. They have this great group ride and it's a ripper. And I'm like, I probably shouldn't take this hour today based on what makes sense financially and what I'm trying to do for my family. But I also know that I need that. I need to have some self-care and take care of that. And I do get some frustration out. I'm not angry at the other riders and I'm not angry at myself, but I can turn a pedal in anger, as it were.
Yeah.
And just have that emotion flow through me. And I'm good at it.
Yeah.
And that helps. Helps to do something you're good at and you love.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah.
Stoke.
Yep. Totally.
Have something you're stoked about in
That's
your life. I think that's awesome. What lessons, when you look back on, it's incredible what you faced, in terms of just, your own accident, your son and, even the way you started as an adult, is there certain overall lessons outside of just, I can do hard things? Clearly you've got grit. We've ridden with you. I know, it's unbelievable. But are there other lessons that you would take away?
Yeah, I think resilience, and I saw this again, in my son, that he struggled to find a place in his career. He would work somewhere and then something would happen and he'd be let go or he would change or he would quit or bounce around. So he was 28 when he passed. He had just gotten his CDL 2 years before and was building a career as a commercial driver.
Yeah.
And he would pick himself up out the ground and just keep going when he had setbacks. I've done a lot of things. If I listed all the different trades and careers and places that I've been in my career, I am in my business life. I was raised by a father who worked at the Bountiful City Light and Power for 28 years. That you get one place, you work there forever, you get a pension. He was in the National Guard, so he's got a double pension on his retirement. And so for a lot of years, I struggled with the fact that I had many different jobs, many different career starts. But then I began to realize that I think there is a higher purpose in these things, and that those experiences prepared me and made me the person that I am today. And there's a lot of value in having diverse experience. My father had a certain value because he was reliable and he spent 28 years and, but at the same time, he got his MBA, he got other upgrades and qualifications and could never move up within that space. And he was kind of stuck and sort of frustrated and just a little apathetic about it. I love him, but he was content to just be in this job that he'd been in for many, many years. And so that to say, with my life experience, but also I just have this resilience to when setbacks come, when difficult times happen, I just pick myself up by the bootstraps and go again. And also it causes me to turn and consider my faith and realize that it's not all up to me. Because I tend to think it is all up to me. I've got to fix everything. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. I've got to recover from this injury. And I believe that there's more at play than just my own efforts. And that there's people that are praying for me and sending me good energy. I think God is on our side and looking out for us and knows us individually and what's happening in our lives and wants to help us.
Yeah.
And is
how did you get there? If you don't mind.
Faith-wise?
Yeah. Just double click on the faith component because that's possibly unique. Maybe not being from Bountiful, Utah, but to keep that, I don't know, mindset if you're the only one who's attending, you know. I don't know what everybody else is doing, but
I think that that's a journey, you know, as a young father and sort of the morals around our religious community, making some choices. Sometimes you can be ostracized from that. So we were just married in a civil ceremony, and then a year later we chose to take our commitment further, and you know, go through the LDS temple and that component. And then I've always just strived to live by those standards for you know, moving forward. But as things evolve, then different things happen. My family's very diverse. My second oldest son served in LDS mission. He's now married to a guy. I love James. I love Cannon. They're awesome people. I didn't imagine that things would turn out that way, you know? And I have several other children who have just different things going on. And so they've had some beliefs that are conflicting with some of the beliefs of the faith. And so they've made an exit. So it's different for me sometimes to sit in my congregation where I'm sitting in the back. I'm sitting there by myself. And I used to occupy a whole row with 9 people, you know?
Yeah.
And, but it serves me. Like it's where I feel like I need to be. And so I just show up and participate. And I love my family, and they're awesome people, and they have their own paths. And I think I've been blessed, to be able to just have, unconditional love and just realize everybody's got their own road they're going down, their own path that they're on. And I continue doing what I feel is right and true for me.
Yeah. When I walk into the Servoss home, what might be the mantra or the theme of the Servoss family that I might see on the wall?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's togetherness and just family loyalty. Like we all really love each other and help each other, and we enjoy each other. We have fun together.
When I think of Tyler, I think of 2 words that you've just said. I think of loyalty, and I think of just showing up. Like I've heard Kevin Day, you know, share with us that, you know, you can call Tyler, and Tyler will drop whatever it is to come, whether that's a bike ride or whether that's whatever help, you know, is needed. And where was that instilled from? Was that in your home as a kid? Did you learn that? Or is that something you figured out on your own? Or is that something you longed for?
Excuse me. The love languages, my mother's love language is really acts of service.
Okay.
And she does that quite a bit. I have a desire for people to like me. It's either a positive thing or a flaw in my personality, but I want people to like me. Uh-huh. So I sometimes it's self-serving. I do things for others because I want them to like me. But then not to go too religious on that perspective, but when I look at Jesus Christ, that I desire to have his image in my countenance, and that I want to do what he would do. And I feel like he would serve other people whenever he has an opportunity. So now it's evolved to when I'm doing things for other people, it's because I love them and I want to be like him. And so that's, I don't like say this for like self-aggrandizement, but it's just the way that I am. Like I was driving up Weber Canyon last week, and there was a gentleman pushing a motorcycle. And I got a soft place in my heart for motorcyclists, but he was pushing a motorcycle. It was obviously disabled. I pulled over. I had a trailer behind my work truck, and I just pushed his motorcycle into the trailer, and we strapped it down, and I drove him to Ogden to his home and dropped him off. And he was trying to give me money and this and that. And I'm like, no, this is just do something, pay it forward, do something for somebody else. And that is what I try and live by. Like if I feel it, I do it. If I feel that moment where I'm like, there's construction on the road and cones everywhere, and I'm just going to duck in here and pull over this truck. I've got a ramp and a trailer, and I can help him. Yeah. I can fix his situation, and I did it.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
When you think through, a child passing, do you go back to that moment often, the news of that? One of the things that we often don't get the opportunity on this podcast to talk about, but for people to just hear a perspective of someone who's been in that moment, you know, whether that's a spouse, a child, you know, a parent or someone close to them. But, you know, you mentioned a little bit about the grieving cycle, and you kind of talked about it being linear.
Yeah.
But as you go back to that, you know, what do you mean by, you know, non-linear? Like, for someone who hasn't gone through the grief cycle, I think that you talked about mentoring, you know, and wanting to be a disciple. I don't know that there's probably too many people who can speak from your shoes and lens about this topic in particular. What else would you say about that?
Well, just to encapsulate that a little bit, I was in a hotel room in Houston, Texas, at a work conference, and my wife called me and said, "There's been an accident. The police are here. They said Kay was involved, but and I said, is he gone?" And they said, we don't know, but they don't send us out as police officers to give you the news unless there has been a fatality. And so I was in disbelief, and we were trying to verify, and I talked to several other people, and he was positively ID'd as the victim in that accident. And just that disbelief, and I was, you know, thousands of miles away without my family. So trying to work through those things over the phone. I jumped a red-eye flight the next morning and flew home. And I literally just rode the whole plane flight with headphones on and a beanie pulled down over my eyes. And I was just weeping. And I came home and grieved with my family. And the one difficult thing about the situation is that the driver was impaired, and he made a choice to turn out in front of somebody, and he killed them. So it wasn't just a complete random accident. It was somebody who made a choice to get behind a wheel and drive a vehicle and turn out in front of somebody and take their life. So I've had to deal a lot with that grief and that anger of that individual, and wanting to, thoughts of retribution or just justice, you know. And so that individual was not has not had any consequences. So they've not appeared at their court appearances. They're on the lam, as it were. And so that's something where I've had to just let go of that as well. I've got other sons, and they, we had to, we knew information about address and where this individual lived and so forth. And we had to just kind of keep that from them because there was so much anger and people wanted to, to lash out.
Retaliate.
And retaliate. Yeah, certainly. When you consider there's an accident and there's a choice that's made to be under the influence of something and get behind the wheel of a car and go drive. So the intersection in Ogden where the accident occurred, I pass through there periodically. I usually cry when I go through there, and I think about him and miss him and the spot where his life was cut short, and that with that grief, again, it's that, I guess you feel like you're kind of over it, and I'm good. Everything's fine. And then, I see somebody on a motorcycle who looks like my kid, and those feelings just come back, but it gets better. It doesn't hurt as bad. But it just kind of comes back around, but it's good to talk about it. It's good to talk about the person, not pretend like they never existed, and just keep their memory alive and hold on to them.
Was there a tendency to want to do that, knowing that you had other children, where, I don't know, I mean, to go through that trauma as a parent, knowing my children now, if one of them were to leave, it would almost be like, if we talk about it, there's the possibility of it happening. You know what I mean? Just the fear of that, like not wanting to lean into that is real.
Well, for a long time, my wife, she'd just hold on to me as I would go for a bike ride or something, and it just dealt with a lot of fear of loss. And you're like, oh, I barely survived this once. Could I do it again if I lost another child or another experience? And there's a lot there to be learned about just having a degree of faith and just trusting that it's going to be okay. If something happens, if you lose another child, it's going to be okay. If you don't, it's going to be okay. And I think that's been a learning experience for us as a family, is just to kind of let go, but my wife will say, I don't always make it to the mountain green rides on Tuesday. I don't make it very often. Tuesday nights with a small family, we've homeschooled all these kids. So we just established that on Tuesdays at like 5:00, we'd pass the baton. She could go do whatever. And I just wouldn't, the kids couldn't call her unless their hair was on fire. And she'd just come back when she was done. And so that's been ingrained for 20 plus years. So Tuesday is a little bit hard for me to get a hall
You
pass.
get a pass.
Yeah, you totally do.
But now with older kids with less needs, they're pretty good on a Tuesday night. They can take care of themselves. Even that, she'll say, well, I just don't want to worry for 2 hours that something could happen to you, that I could get a phone call. Because of 30 years of riding, there have actually been 4 or 5 phone calls she's received where I'm in the back of an ambulance or something. I mean, I joke that when I see people with awesome tattoos on their arms and shoulders, I'm like, I don't need tattoos. I could walk you through all my scars, and they've all got great stories with them, and I've got many. I've broken my collarbone 5 times, 3 times on one side, 2 on the other. Some other hardware here and there, and I'm still kicking.
Still kicking, man. Talk more about your wife. This is an amazing woman.
Yeah.
Because as you kind of described the story of, of how this all began, what's she like? What are the qualities, attributes that, define her?
So her name is Stephanie, and she's an amazing human being. She's the one who the kids come to if they got a challenging thing. If they want to talk about feelings or just difficult things. They don't necessarily come to Dad. They come to me for, hey, can I get $5 or can you help me lift this thing or move this thing? She carries a lot of the emotional weight and the emotional experience. And she's just been an incredible partner, and the way that she loves and teaches our children. Again, we've homeschooled. I've been a supportive homeschool father, so I do a lot of teaching practical life skills. So my homeschool is often like, hey, we need to change the brakes in the truck. You're coming with me. We're going to change the brakes in the truck, or we're going to go fix some sprinklers or do these things. And she has led different co-ops that we've been a part of, cooperatives with other homeschoolers. She's just taught these kids all through the years. We have several kids who are in college and who've had different vocational trainings, and they've been successful. And these kids have grown up and learned how to learn. And that's like one of the most important things for us as a family, that not just being able to regurgitate information, but if they want to learn something, they have the skill set to go and study that out. And with all the information we have available today, if you know how to learn, you can go on YouTube or all these other places and you can figure out how to do almost anything, it seems. Just having her by my side and having her also allow me the space to go and do what I love, even when she's scared. I am an avid backcountry skier, and I'd love to hear about your avalanche story. I'm on 23 months of consecutive skiing, all in Utah. The later parts of the summer, I'm up on the backside of Francis Peak on a little patch of snow, getting 6 turns. I got to get August taken care of, but I just keep that running, and I love ski touring, and she worries. She hears about the avalanche that a bunch of mountain green guys were involved in, and other avalanches, and she reads. I try and keep her from watching the news and hearing about the latest avalanche danger, but she could just hold on to me and really lock me down as a partner and be like, I just can't handle this, and she feels the fear and lets me do it anyway.
I think that's the value of you giving her Tuesday nights.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. That she needs some of that. And you don't know what she does. She goes and figures it could be anything and everything every Tuesday night.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's expanded a little beyond Tuesday nights now with older children. But from, when we had 7 Rugrats running around, it'd just be like, tag team, see ya.
Yeah.
And that's been a beautiful thing. She really loves, she loves history and ancient things. So she's on 650 days of Scottish Gaelic in Duolingo. So she can actually hold a conversation in Gaelic, which sounds like completely like an alien language to me. She's been to Scotland twice. It's one of her big life goals to live in Scotland for an extended period of time and study the culture and the history. And
that's awesome.
She really loves it. And I love that she's a great student and just learns a lot. And she's always learning.
Yeah.
When you think about that, just that last point, because I'm intrigued, you homeschool children.
Yeah.
She's still into learning. Did she go to school? I mean, when you start a family at 17,
Yeah.
right? The thing that probably most 17-year-olds want in the worst way is to ditch school the rest of their,
Right.
of their life. But, I have found, I was a horrible student, as a teen, but at this stage in my life now, because I hated it, right? But because I wasn't good at it, I now hunger for it. I mean, there's literal hunger for knowledge. Is she that way?
Yeah. She consumes, like, even when our children were younger, she's a voracious reader. So we'd have like, the Work and the Glory books that are like 1,000 pages. And she would have like, kids weren't starving and diapers were changed and house is relatively clean. And she would have read, the whole volume in 3 days or something. And just amazing reader.
Yeah.
If we're ever watching the screen and the text scrolls through on a movie and you're reading about it, and I'm like, can you pause it for a second? And she's read it 10 minutes ago. She reads so quickly. But yeah, I think that sometimes with homeschooling, people get the idea that they need to be much more, just very highly educated, like a teacher would be, or be well beyond their kids in their education. And we found is when they were teenagers, like in getting into advanced math, and there were lots of things that we didn't know, but we could plug them into resources, and we'd be humble enough to be like, we don't know, but we'd do that, or we'd be part of a cooperative and there'd be other people that could teach, or the kids could have really self-driven education. And so she has done some college here and there, and I think that's going to be part of her path in the future, just because she loves to learn. But she's taken many classes and trainings around homeschool, again, around the Scottish Gaelic. She's actually a shaman, so she studies ancient shamanism and really understands kind of the spiritual element and energy and a bunch of other things that I don't fully understand. But she's mentored in that community, and just a really smart, bright spirit.
I love that. You mentioned this earlier, but you can become a very educated human today and not have a degree.
Yeah.
Just being well read. There's access to so much knowledge and information, that's out there. So freestyle a little bit. You lived a lot of life.
Yeah.
Anything that you would say, just thoughts, feelings, people that stick out, advice to people who are facing tough stuff in life.
Yeah, I think that, I mentioned part of what I'm building now as a business is a connecting business. So it's called Perpetual Connecting, and it's all about making business to business introductions and connections, and me learning how to monetize that, where it's a win-win-win for myself, for other people I'm making introductions for. And I've learned through that like not having an agenda, just genuinely being interested in people, that's something that I am interested in. I love to hear people's stories. I love to listen to y'all's podcast. I'm probably the top fan. I've listened to every one of them, and I consume a lot of content like that. I love to hear those things. And when I feel self-conscious sometimes, actually, this is a little difficult for me to talk about myself for, a period of time, where I would love to hear more about you and ask you questions and learn more about your life and your story. 'Cause that's the way that I tend to be, is interested in other people. And I think that's one way to foster relationships. People love to be heard. They love to be listened to, and not just listened to, but be heard and understood, and have connection. And so I think connection is super important in any facet of life. I mean, even you look at bike racing, like some of the premier bike racers in the world, they're also diplomats. If you look at the guys in the Tour de France, like they have to be diplomatic with other teams, other riders, other dynamics. If they're just an incredibly unkind human being, then those times when they need an extra little helping hand or something, another team to go to the front and help pull back a brake, they're probably not going to get it. There's a certain guy whose name starts with L.A., who wasn't that kind of human being when he was in that space.
Yeah.
Just from mutual friends that I know and stories that you hear. And I think that made his life a lot more difficult when it could have been easier. And so that's just maybe a nugget to just be interested in people, listen to them, ask questions.
I love that. You know, when I was also raised LDS, one of the things that I caught on to, just, I don't know why, the way my mind works, but for years and years of reading scripture, it always stuck out to me, flocks and fields. You know, I mean, in that time, that's how people survived, is their flocks and fields, you know? And today, I really feel like the modern day version of that is knowledge and network.
Yeah.
What you know and who you know is literally your ability to survive. And so I love that you're in a business of doing it. I think that's cool.
Yeah,
You're connecting people. I think network is so powerful. It's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you being a good human, a human that cares, you know?
Thank you.
I think there's a lot of value in that.
Well, sometimes I wear my heart on my sleeve, you know, and I probably shed a few too many tears here.
You deserve it, man.
Yeah, it's okay.
You've been through tough stuff.
I appreciate you guys and the conversation, you know,
Yeah.
and I love what you're doing with Brainstoke and what you're doing with Levo. I think it's a needed space, and I like how there's vulnerability on your conversations, and it's not always just people puffing out their chest and like, look at what I've done, you know.
Yeah.
Even like listening to Keegan last week or recently, and some of his vulnerability, and you know, he's not perfect. I think when you're such a winning athlete that you're somewhat robotic, or that everything is just perfect all the time, and we all put our pants on, you know, one leg at a time.
Yeah, I think that vulnerability is really relatable. And for people to willing to share and be vulnerable provides a lot of value to the people that are listening. So
Yeah.
We appreciate you doing the same.
Struggle's real. So thanks for sharing it. You know, it comes from an entirely different place for someone who's received those calls, you know, who's been in those accidents, who's been in the hospital. So yeah, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's go for a bike ride.
Yeah, you've had your daily dose.